Welcome back. It is now September 3rd. A little bit of a cool, cloudy morning out here, but we're supposed to have a hot afternoon and a pretty nice warm week, so I'm sure there's going to be lots of harvesting going on. This field of canola behind me, let's take a quick look at it here. This field is ripening up really rapidly. I'm pretty sure this field is going to be harvestable this week as long as moisture allows. You can see the stems are still quite green. You can see we got flea beetles on some of these stems. That's not unusual this time of the year. You can see here they're stripping some of the green off some of the stems here because they are desperate for food. There's not a whole lot of tender young canola out there for them to feed on anymore, so they have to make do with what they can get. Now that we had that rain last week, any fields that had been harvested, we're going to start seeing some volunteer. You can see all this right here. You can see we definitely have a lot of volunteers starting to sprout here. So still, pretty small target to hit. Give it another week. We can probably get some pretty effective, post-harvest burn-off done some of these fields, both for kochia, another weed regrowth that is recovering, as well as the volunteer that is starting to emerge. Here in this dryland corner of a barley field, you can see we have a really good weedy patch. This barley got harvested about 10 days or so ago. So you can see the kochia already has a bit of regrowth. So that means that with last week's moisture and this regrowth, we're at a good time to come in and spray. This time of the year, it's up till almost the end of September. You can go in with a product like DB878 or Intruvix, and you can take pretty good care of some of this kochia and other weeds. There's some lamb's quarters in here, some mallow, stuff like that. But anyways, you can take care of them with no real residual concerns for next year at all. So that's a great product, as well as things like Blackhawk and Corex as well. This cover crop has gone in where we took some rye silage off a few weeks ago, and things in here are a little bit of a mixed bag. So this is oats with brassica in it. The oats are beginning to show a few signs of barley yellow dwarf virus. However, it's not all that bad compared to some of the fields around the Park Lake and Picture Butte area. You can see we do have some affected leaves and plants here. But right now, the bigger problem is the flea beetles moving out of the canola fields as things ripen, hitting these brassicas. You can see we have significant damage on a lot of these brassicas. So these flea beetles are going to get controlled here in the next day or two, and hopefully that will allow the brassica to kind of outgrow them once it gets off to a head start in here. I'm not a huge fan of the brassica oat cover crop in this area because those brassicas are a host to flea beetles. If the flea beetles are not controlled, it'll both reduce drastically the yield of your brassicas, but it'll also potentially be a carryover problem for any canola field in the area in the spring. We have typically seen these fields, right beside them the next year, we'll generally have some pretty bad flea beetle problems. And these brassicas, because these are a disease vector and an insect vector, basically resets your rotation for a canola crop in this field back to zero. Corn is looking really good this week. This field is pretty much out of blister stage now. We're in milk. We're filling out real nice. This is 1027 from Cantera. Looking really good. Great potential in here. At this point now that we're in milk stage, we're filling. We can start cutting back on the water. Inch a week is probably plenty. Inch and a half should be good. And before you know it, we'll be at silage timing in here. Well, the safflower is definitely starting to dry down a little bit. There's very little green left in it. Stems are all, for the most part, brown. So I think we're getting closer and closer to harvest on this, but it'll probably still be another week or two. Well, after last week's rain, we're certainly seeing a lot more volunteer. Some of these fields, this is all volunteer fall rye, and we're definitely going to have to spray this out this fall. Now that we've had that rain on it, I'm confident that probably most of it has emerged. So we're probably going to spray this out in the next week here. Sorghum this week is definitely picking up some more height. It's close to 7 feet tall, some of these bigger plants here now. And you can see we do have more seed heads starting to emerge. So these guys are looking pretty good. There should be some yield here for the cows to eat this fall. Well, there's still definitely some pretty green canola fields out here in this irrigated field. You can see on this main stem, I'm 50% of the way up. The seeds are still, pretty green. There was a little bit of mottled color change right at the very bottom, but up at the top here, the seeds are getting solid, but they are green, so we're going to have to wait quite a bit longer. Customer wants to use Regulon Ion in this field, and we're still quite a ways away from that. Still at least probably a week, more likely 10 days or more. Yellow dwarf is continuing to affect a lot of oat fields. This field did get a relatively late infection, but you can still see there is some stunted plants down there with orange leaves. So some of those plants are still producing heads, but they are pretty small and thin compared to the unaffected plants, which are for the most part flowering or early milk stage. So overall, when you look across the field, you can't see a whole lot just because those unaffected plants have overgrown the stunted plants. Some of these fields are way worse off for yellow dwarf virus than others. This one is one of the worst that I deal with on a weekly basis. And you can see there is still some green unaffected plants here and there that are in boot stage or starting to push out heads. But by far the vast majority of the field is stunted and affected by yellow dwarf to some degree or another. And yield here will be greatly reduced. Well, my little canola swaths are still here. They haven't blown away yet. They're looking pretty good. They have been swathed for about 6 days now, so they still need probably another week or so to dry down and for any greens and stuff to clear. So maybe by the end of next week, I'll be running these through the little processor and getting some yield data out of them. Well, it's time to start getting some of my samples processed. So I'm in the shade of a bin yard here this afternoon, taking a couple hours. I'm going to start running through some of these. I got about 8 bags with me here, so got the little mini thresher kit all set up, good to go. Got the container on the bottom. I did run this a bit yesterday. It does take a little bit of time still to run each garbage bag of heads through, but overall it's doing a pretty good job. So let's check her out in action. Well, the forecast for the weekend looks like it is going to be hot and dry, so I'm sure we're going to get lots of harvesting done the next couple of days. There is a small chance of some rain next week, so hopefully we can get a lot of acres done before then. So with that being said, we will see you next week.